Production and factory settings bring their own set of hurdles for wireless connections. Harsh conditions both indoors and out create a daunting task for engineers to work through. Now let me tell you, those engineers ain't looking to back down from a challenge like this, no sir. This here's where we gather round to tackle them hurdles, swap thoughts, and lend a hand. Welcome to the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop with your hosts, Scott and Jeremy.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Sweet 16 episode of the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop. My name is Scott McNeil, and my constant co-host, Jeremy Baker. Say hi, Jeremy.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? So nice to be here.
It's been going on, the 16 episodes. That's almost a year and a half now. You know that? It's a year and 4 months so far. That's not too shabby.
That's 2 cubed.
That is too. So we have a lot going on today, a lot of stuff that we want to talk about. But before we go much further, we got some housekeeping items to take care of. And we have some winners that we need to announce for our Wi-Fi Explorer Pro 3 Definitive User Guide giveaways. What you got, Jeremy?
Well, it looks like we hit a perfect storm. So for the books, the people that were selected already had a copy of the software, so we're actually going to be able to do 4 winners. So our IT winner is JW Hannam, so we're going to ship him a book. Our OT winner is Heath Weeks, the homie. So we'll ship him a book, and then I've got to ship him some stuff that we picked up at WLPC for him. And then I'm going to butcher these names, but for a software license, we're going to send Carlos Assunção, and I hope I said that right. And then Robin, this one is even trickier. Robin Decloedt. So both of you will try and get you hooked up with a license key here in the next week or so, or maybe even before the episode drops. And then, as always, if you're not familiar with it, the book's a great resource. And then also they have a really nice cheat sheet for the filters that they've put out there for the software. So you could just type in Wi-Fi Explorer cheat sheet. That should come up. I use that all the time. And then there was also, just to kind of refresh on this, episode 45 of Keith Parsons' Heavy Wireless podcast. Nigel and Adrian are on there discussing Wi-Fi Explorer and kind of the genesis of the book. And they do a really good, kind of a good job of explaining like the use cases for the software. So check that out. And then just another reminder, a shameless self-plug. If you look on Thingiverse and you have an awesome, either the WiPry790, which is their 900 megahertz, or a Clarity or Lucid, there's a free bracket that you can download and print for yourself that'll allow you to hang that off of your computer screen. Scott, you got one of those, so tell me how awesome it is.
It's actually really awesome. It's hanging on my computer right now. My Oscium fits right in it, and it hangs perfectly off the back of it. So it's more of a hands-free experience and trying to figure out something with Velcro or whatever. So, but you put the file out there for everyone to download. So if you have a 3D printer, the link will be in the show notes to where you can go print it for yourself in the color of your choice.
Yeah, all I had was green when I printed those. So, and also, if you don't have a 3D printer and you live in the US, send me a message at jeremy@industrialwifishop.com, and we'll see about printing you one and shipping it out. So, Scott, you want to cover the upcoming events?
Yeah, so we got a lot of events coming up that we've constantly been talking about, and really we are big supporters of WiCo, the wireless community series of events that have all about bringing the wireless community together. It's all about smaller, more local events, because not everybody can afford to go to the big WLPCs, whether it's Prague or in Phoenix or in Mexico. I haven't had the opportunity to go to any of those, but we have a WiCo event in North Carolina now. We're doing our second annual one this year, and that's on the 14th of next month in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And there is a ton of great people who are going to be presenting at this. So I was actually looking at the agenda the other day. Tom from CWNP is going to be presenting. We got Julio Petrobis from Net Ally presenting. There is a lot of just Wi-Fi goodness going to be going on, and I'm presenting too. So I'm going to be going over some fun with spectrum analysis. So it's going to be a good time. So if you are anywhere near Chapel Hill, a couple hours from, hey, check out wyco.org. There's still a few open spots left. It's going to be a great one-day conference. Then the next day on 5/15, there's one in Philadelphia, which Ali is going to be at both. So he is actually going to be at Chapel Hill, and then he's flying out that night to make sure he's there for the one in Philadelphia. And he says that there are some spots open for that one. And finally, Nashville on 5/29. Jeremy, you're going to that one, correct? You're still You're on the docket. I saw that for the actual itinerary for that one.
Yep, and we're going to try and stand up a curb network in the parking lot, and then do some mobility, and then also hopefully part of it's we're going to do point to point on it too. So we'll do the fluid max and the fluidity / mobility for display. And I also wanted to note at Chapel Hill, I just saw JJ Manella is going to be not presenting, but she's going to be joining that one too. So
yeah, she'll be hanging out. And then so yeah, Tom Carpenter is going to be presenting, and David Coleman, the man himself, is actually kicking off at 9:30 with what looks to be a really good session. So I mean, there's some heavy hitters going on in this one. So this will be a good time. Again, if you're anywhere in the area and can make this one, I highly recommend it.
And then is the Philly one looks like it's going to be really cool too, because they're doing that on a ship,
right?
Which looks awesome. So bring an eye patch.
Yeah, that's the pirate version of Wyco.
And also, if you're at the North Carolina one, you better get Ollie to give you his autograph earlier in the day, because he's going to be hustling out of there.
Yeah, Ollie's everywhere, man. Especially now that he's working for
Nile.
For Nile, he is all over the place. That poor guy doesn't get any rest.
Yeah, that's actually you should check out Nile. They seem like a really cool company, and they're doing some pretty interesting stuff. So bug him. I'm sure he doesn't have enough on his calendar already.
And then we got OT Skatacon coming up by the Automation Ladies. That is in July, the 23rd through the 25th in Houston. And, there's all kinds of good stuff going on there. That is primarily an OT conference. But if you are a wireless guy and you are looking to expand your skill set, or at least get familiar with what's in the OT universe, that would be a great one to attend. The Automation Ladies are pretty awesome. We'll have their stuff linked in the show notes as well.
And then Scott, you got some exciting news to discuss, so I guess we could go ahead and get into it.
Yeah, so let's jump into our Sweet 16 episode. Some of you may or may not know that I am part of the joint NIST IEEE Industrial Wireless Working Group. It is run by Dr. Rick Kandel from NIST, and it's a really cool working group. And the project for the past couple years has been trying to build some documentations that provide a reference test architecture for evaluating the performance of industrial wireless networks. And so just last month or so, it passed its first series of its first series of review committees. And so it is now an official document. It is not out for download yet, but the first drafts are complete. The review committees are from IEEE standards are happy with it thus far. And this is going to be a great document. It establishes like a functional model for RF industrial wireless performance, and it's all about figuring out what your degradation factors are. And this paper calls those aggressors. layman's term, it's RF interference, right? It's non-Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi based interferers that can cause problems in industrial wireless networks. But like I said, it's all about providing this reference test architecture so that you can set something up, lab something up, and be able to test something that's similar or have the methodologies to test something similar to your current environment, which gives you a much better chance of a successful deployment. When you look at industrial deployments versus like your standard enterprise deployments, the risk is much greater in industrial deployments because the data reliability has to be there. If you're on an enterprise network and your cat video freezes for a second or two, it's no big deal. But when you're talking about industrial machine to machine communication, you have to make sure that your communication is low latency, that your data is always available, and it's always getting where it's supposed to go. So there's a little bit more involved with that. So the planning on these networks is more involved. This paper it targets specifically, manufacturing, power generation, and controls and mission critical environments where machine to machine communication is involved. But like I said, it's all about, because it's NIST and because it's IEEE, it's all about the standardization of these methodologies, which is really cool. And long term, it's going to enhance the reliability of these systems that are being deployed in manufacturing or in more heavy, dirty industrial, or even more lighter converting facilities. So it's all about giving you a better opportunity to make sure that your wireless deployment is going to be successful. I've been really proud to be a member of this group, and it's truly comprised of people from all over the world. There are academics, there are vendors, and then there are guys like me who work for an integrator who are out in the field and boots on the ground. I've been able to help supply them with a fair amount of spectrum samples from multiple different interferers that I found in the field that they have been able to use on the back end for the creation of this document. So there's a lot of hands in it. I feel it's going to be really worthwhile for the industrial wireless community in general. But I'm really happy to announce that it's passed its first round of reviews, and I think it's going to be a really good thing when it all comes out. I'll provide a link to the NIST.gov announcement in the show notes. But it's pretty exciting when you think about it, and I got a cool little diagram in there that'll kind of help you understand what the test process is like. And when you work hard on something and it gets released and you're pretty proud to be part of it, all is good in the universe, right?
Yeah. So with this kind of working group, is this something that people can volunteer for, or are there ways to contribute? Like let's say somebody has some of these captures or things like that.
Well, what happened was Justin Shade from Phoenix Contact, who was on not long ago, he's a good friend of mine, and he has actually been a part of this group for a long time. And he essentially kind of introduced me and got me into the group. So I don't know if it's like a general, that anybody can just go become part of. But if you work in industry and manufacturing and you have experience with wireless in these areas, and this is something you feel like you would like to become a part of and contribute with, reach out to me. I'll be happy to talk to Rick and see if we can't get you involved.
Yeah, I mean, there's always it's a volunteer effort, so.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, Rick and Kang Lee and a couple others are, paid members because it's NIST and IEEE that's actually footing the bill for all this. But a lot of the rest of us, we're just volunteering our time. And it's just, for me, it's another way to kind of give back to the community. This in some way helps someone new to wireless in our sector, and it can help them provide their client with a stable deployment. Then it's worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's why I kind of have attempted and volunteering with the WLAN Pi group because it's, I use the product. It's been really helpful for me. So, what little bit of talent I can lend, it's nice to attempt to do that at least. But yeah, I mean, I think like time, talent, and treasure on this stuff is like, is really nice. When people have that ability to give back a little bit, because you also indirectly learn so much doing that stuff. You get exposed to things that you weren't aware of before, and it really does help you like in your own personal skill building.
It does, and the academic process on which they have to do everything, while sometimes can be a bit of a pain, it really kind of opens your eyes on how these things get done, and it's nice to experience it. So then when you look back and you're looking at other documents that have gone through this vetting process, it helps kind of increase that trust level, because not only was it written by competent people, but it was reviewed by competent people,
Mhm.
and then it was fully assembled and approved by competent people.
And it's not a chat GPT hallucination.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, it's not. This is NIST and IEEE. This is vendor agnostic. So this is not something that's being kicked out by a marketing department.
Hmm.
So, that's a huge thing
Oh,
there.
you mean that the theoretical marketing speed of 1.21 gigawatts
Correct.
isn't
Correct.
always true.
Well, I mean, and when it comes to interferers, lightning you have to be careful with, because it's a very big interferer. So,
Hmm. Yeah, and it's sometimes it too, like, especially looking at wireless deployments. Let's say you're trying to roam and you're going 88 miles an hour. It might be a little bit difficult to trust that throughput that they tell you can get. So yeah, I guess you got some news. Do
well,
you
and so
have some news?
I was doing some reading for another project, and I started coming across some news about the growth of industrial related wireless communication. And there's a consultancy group out there that did this report. And granted, it's one of those pay to play reports, but they did release a lot of the information that you can go look at for free. So I'll drop the link in the show notes. But it's interesting, what they're talking about is the current market value of industrial and manufacturing related wireless networks and assets, network and assets throughout the world right now is an estimated 26 billion. That's billion with a B, billion dollars US. But they're projecting within the next 10 years, by 2034, that is going to be double. It's going to be over $50 billion, which shows you how much wireless communications is growing and influencing things in the industrial and manufacturing universe. So it's becoming more than just non-critical sensor packages, right? It's becoming SIP safety over wireless. It's becoming navigation and full communication for all manner of AVGs and AMRs and robots and in some cases drones. So no longer is wireless the unspoken medium of industry. It is finding solid footing and trust and reliance in the worlds that Jeremy, you and I work in, right?
Yeah.
Their yearly growth, they're projecting, they're forecasting like 6.9% growth per year. I mean, that is a metric crap ton of money every year, as far as growth is concerned. So when they sit there and they divide out the market segmentation, and these are just kind of the top segments that they're talking about. So as far as growth is concerned, so by product type, they're top. They see the top growth being in sensors, wireless sensors, then wireless controllers, and then wireless gateways. That's kind of like their top growth items that they're projecting. Application wise, process automation, which, if you're not familiar with process automation is continuous. It does not stop. So the paper making process, It's a chemical process and it's just continuous, right? So you're always running. Versus batch manufacturing, which has definite starts and stops for each grouping that you're creating, right? And then factory automation, so that's bots and robots and all and AVGs and AMRs, and then energy and power. I'm sorry, then machine automation. So that's just by application. By end user, the top growth is going to be just in general manufacturing, and then they're projecting oil and gas and energy power. But the interesting thing, as far as industrial wireless communications, on what they are projecting, the top category of wireless communications that they see growing this much is 802.11 Wi-Fi. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me when you look at just all the general data uses for that, especially with things that engineers can use on the floor, be it tablets, be it VR or augmented reality, and just general purpose data. But closely followed up by Zigbee. They are really seeing a big future for Zigbee in the realm of industry. I personally haven't seen the use cases for Zigbee in industry. I see it in the consumer market all the time. Maybe there must be just an entire area that I'm just not privy to, that I'm not looking at. And then cellular, which cellular makes perfect sense with the growth of everything cellular that's been going on, 5G up and private 5G and private cellular networks. That just makes perfect sense. So I totally can see that.
Yeah, and I think I think too, like the sub 1 gig stuff too. I mean, I think that's going to explode now that there's actually like some decent Halo chips coming out.
Well,
And I
I
mean,
called it a couple years ago that when I saw that Halo was coming up and it was 802.11 on 900 meg, I knew that was going to end up blowing up. But to be fair, I'm a 900 megahertz junkie, so
yeah. And I think, all this stuff, it's like you've got all these things that are able to be kind of configured together. So it's like you can have a 900 megahertz backhaul and then like a 2.4 radio or 5 gigahertz radio on the other end to allow a modern client to connect to that. And then you're able to pick stuff up. And even stuff like at WLPC, this was a really interesting talk from GT Hill, where he was talking about kind of how a tomato goes from a field, to a store shelf. And one of the things that he mentioned in there was that there are like wireless sensors that are coming out that are kind of passive in the same way as it's not exactly like an RFID tag, but it's passive in the same way. So like temperature sensors and stuff like that doesn't even require power, but they're able to kind of communicate back into the system. So it's only going to get more and more, and anywhere you can get a signal that you have information that's useful, or information that we don't even think is useful, is going to become useful. Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
I just thought this whole report on everything that they've released for free, was really interesting. And some of the key market drivers that they're really talking about is and the driving force, and this is probably where Zigbee's coming from, is the adoption of IIoT, right? The industrial Internet of Things. And I think that is a lot of the non-critical sensor packages and everything that can just completely bypass your standard OT networks and go straight to the cloud for analysis, right? Things for especially when you look at like big agriculture with those temperature sensors and moisture sensors and all these things, they're just collecting data and gathering data. They're not critical for actually all the processes that are involved with whatever you're creating, right? The second driver that they mention is operational efficiency, but again, that points me to sensor packages, right? Because it's all about preventive maintenance. So vibration sensors, temperature, humidity, all these different driving forces that cause machinery to break down or enhance its wear. If you can monitor and measure that and are able to perform proper preventive maintenance, that can save you ridiculous amounts of money. But again, there's sensor packages that you don't have to have for the actual process of whatever it is that you're manufacturing, right? So they don't have to be attached to your segmented OT network. They can be on their own network and feed all their data directly to the cloud. And then finally, they do call out the advancements in wireless technologies, and we're already seeing that. And we've talked about this kind of ad nauseum in several episodes in the past. When you look at your advancements of wireless stability, moving from N and AC to Wi-Fi 6, right? So with the protocol advancements and the changes on how things are operating and how data is handled, stability is enhanced. Yes, there's greater throughput, and yes, there's all these other things. But there has been a big concentration on lower latency, right? And data stability, to give the end user a better experience. Well, the byproduct of that is creating a better experience as well for manufacturing, a machine-to-machine communication. And Wi-Fi 7 is supposed to be even more so on that front, because they weren't really concentrating on the throughput factor. They were concentrating on the communication efficiency factors, right? And so that drops the all-important latency down even further. So really, we're just slowly creeping closer and closer to true wired speeds on wireless, right? Now, still the vast majority of wireless is half duplex, but isn't MLO claiming full duplex communications, or am I off on that?
I would have to look, but
Yeah, I need to look on
it's
that.
it seems
Don't
like
hold me to
it's
that, but
yeah, I mean, but it definitely seems, they've got that preamble puncturing and stuff like that where it's like you can cut out interfering sections of bands and stuff. And back to the operational efficiency with these sensors and stuff, a lot of this stuff isn't really like a high throughput requirement. So making that communication time more efficient is, you just get such a good bonus from that, because in an area, you might have 1,000 sensors that need to talk, just spitballing, it's probably more than that, but you just have the ability to like have all those clients communicate that information back. And I mean, I really think that, like you're saying, like you can basically like detach that or decouple that from the actual like process IO requirements and just have that as like a, hey, so there's probably a ton of systems where the customer's not necessarily ready to rip and replace a whole IO cabinet and PLCs and all that stuff, where it's like, hey, we could add this stuff in and basically make our hardware, ideally, make these systems have more uptime, last longer. And, that's probably going to be some pretty sweet, I don't want to say easy, but it's probably going to be some good money for people that are looking for opportunities, find a solution to this stuff and just start retrofitting older systems.
well, yeah, I mean, you look at it, it's these sensor packages are really that don't have to be on your critical OT network. That's low hanging fruit, man. You put it on its own segment, and you don't even have to put it behind the OT firewall. You can have it as part of the corporate network if need be, because it's just sensor data, right? And depending on the sensor data, even if it does get compromised, it's not like it's easy to read. Banner Engineering, for example, their sensor packages, what they communicate from radio to radio and whatnot is, if you capture that traffic, it's a meaningless series of numbers that only mean something to other banner radios. So there's a lot more to it than meets the eye when you look at all that stuff. But again, it's not critical to the actual manufacturing process. Now, I guess an argument can be made that it is, as far as like preventive maintenance and things of that nature. But if I'm at a paper mill, do I have to have these sensors to make paper? No, I do not. I can make paper. Why? Because we've been doing it this way for the last 100 years without all of this stuff, right? So the critical processes can continue, and then you can still get all of this great data separately, even though that data does directly apply to what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's and I'm just to make sure, to be clear about it, it's, you don't want to just assume that it's meaningless nonsense. You should still be careful about the security of your network. But yeah, it's like, okay, well, this, you might find out that a motor's running hot or something like that. But it also can also be something that helps you air gap that too. Like that might be like a defense in depth concept too, of just having that stuff decoupled from your control system altogether. Um,
Oh, I couldn't
and
agree
I,
more on
and,
that point, because if you could
yeah,
you want to keep that separate, because in general, while a lot of security advancements have been made for all these sensor packages and whatnot, you don't want to put anything that's easier to compromise on that OT network. So if you
mhm.
could keep it separate, you want to keep it separate,
Yeah,
because
and I
PLCs and
think,
control modules and SCADA modules, they were never built with security in mind.
yeah. Well,
So,
I mean, just look up PLC man in the middle attacks, and it's, Mac spoofing is uh
well, even then, if you're not trying to spoof or
easy.
capture traffic, you can shut down a PLC with a simple ping overload. This is a discussion I have with people all the time, because the Ethernet ports that are on a Rockwell PLC on an ENT2 card, for example, that ENT2 card does not have the same resources on its Ethernet port that a switch has, or even a PC has, for God's sakes. So
Hmm.
you can sit there and slam it with an extended ping sweep of high speed pings, and that'll lock that card up, and there goes all your communication.
Yeah. And then also, I mean, just thinking about that too, like the throughput on some of this stuff, if you're running well in an older system, you might have 10 megabit ports or 100 megabit ports. And if you start adding sensor data along with that too, you might create more problems than benefit from it too if you start forcing additional traffic onto those network segments.
Agreed.
That's fun.
Yeah. And the last thing that they were mentioning before you hit the paywall is they were talking about the key competitors in this space. And so I was looking through this list, and I just pulled the top 15 and threw it into the show notes, but some of these names make perfect sense to me. And some of these names I had no idea were making wireless products for industry and manufacturing. So, and their number one spot in growth, they're showing Siemens. No surprise there. That's a massive company, right? They're well known for
Yeah.
their Scalent series of network hardware and wireless. They are a major player in the industrial wireless universe. That totally makes sense to me. Followed up by Snyder Electric, which I get because Snyder also owns Delta V, and some others, and those guys were actually players in the creation of the original uh, industrial wireless protocols, of Wireless Heart and ISA 100, because that was backed by a lot of different manufacturing companies. Third is Rockwell, but Rockwell doesn't make anything wireless on their own. They rely on strategic partners. So ProSoft Technologies is a prime example, which is actually now owned by Belden. But so that's interesting that Rockwell's in there. Honeywell, they make their own wireless ABB. If ABB makes their own wireless, that's news to me. I just haven't looked deep into it. And for those who aren't familiar with, ABB is a very large DCS manufacturer, distributed control systems. Our company GPA has a very deep bench of ABB engineers, so I'm kind of more familiar with that than most. Emerson, again, a big player in the original industrial wireless protocols, along with Yokogawa and Mitsubishi. So everybody I've listed thus far have all had a hand in the creation of the industrial wireless protocols years ago, right? So that all makes sense. But then they talk about Panasonic, and I'm like, Panasonic. I remember being 16 and my boombox was a Panasonic, right?
Hmm.
I was 20 and I bought my first big television. It was a Panasonic. I had no idea they were anywhere in the manufacturing space with this stuff. So I'm wondering if it's Panasonic is the parent company of some others that I'm just not aware of.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Continental AG, not familiar with those guys. Um, Advantech is in here. Omron is in here. And then my guys at Phoenix Contact, you made it in this top list of growth in here, and Belden. Now Belden, I understand why Belden is so big on this list, because they recently acquired Hirschman, which is a big producer of industrial networking and wireless equipment, and they also bought ProSoft. So ProSoft is now part of Bowden. So seeing Bowden on this list doesn't surprise me.
Very cool.
It's a little food for thought for you guys out there. Really, what I wanted to start digging into today was the importance of best practices. And this is kind of just a general statement, because you want to have best practices in whatever project you're working on, be it network, be it wireless, be it whatever, right? But really, best practices in industrial wireless applications are incredibly important for several reasons. So they ensure your reliability, safety, especially if you're running SIP safety over wireless. It really helps you keep scalability in mind, so that as your wireless network grows, you're able to easily accomplish the additions that you need to do. And then long-term maintenance of that system. When best practices are used and put in place, maintenance over time becomes a lot more structured and easier to actually, well, maintain, right?
Yeah. So, one of the first things you have on here is reliability. So that's kind of the key to all of this, right? It's like you want as many of those nines as you can get. And it's not just, hey, making sure that, motors are installed properly, metal structures, everything's shielded and grounded appropriately. You're not running wires through the drip pan of your AC on your crane.
You're not stringing Cat 5, along fluorescent lighting.
And I mean, yeah, oh yeah. You're not installing your R coax too close to the bus bar, so you get problems and electrocute your favorite bald wireless engineer. But yeah, I mean, some of the notes you have in here, like signal dropouts, latency issues, data loss, all that stuff is definitely like important for reliability. But it's also, and this might be better for a different section, but it's things like having procedures and processes in place, so that way, a site that I was just at, we were seeing some devices that they were standing up for commissioning, the Wi-Fi hotspots and like all that kind of stuff. And it's just OBSS interference everywhere, and you have like dropouts and stuff like that. And so it's not necessarily just, hey, is the equipment installed properly, but it's like, if somebody's coming into your workplace, have you already thought about kind of contingency plans and stuff like that? And that also leads to the second one you got here, which is considering security. And the password on a Post-it note days need to end.
Absolutely. Or your all of your passwords on the inside door and inside of the cabinet door on your panels out in
Flip the workstation
MC.
keyboard over.
Right. Well, I mean, even then with when you look at industrial wireless, security is becoming more important. So you want to make sure you're using whatever security protocols are supported by the devices that you're putting out there. So wireless sensors obviously are going to have different security measures than standard 802.11 Wi-Fi versus 802.15.4 packages, right? So you want to make sure you're following through with everything that you can in order to protect your communication and your data.
And JJ might be typing a nasty email if we don't say this explicitly, but if you can use WPA3, use WPA3.
Yeah, I kind of sing that from the hills too. I'm a big advocate of WPA3, not only because of the increase the increase of encryption capabilities, but also the efficiency of the encryption, but the management frame protection. And that's kind of one of the things I talk about ad nauseum, because that initial handshake, it goes ahead and it encrypts that. So right off the bat, you're eliminating three major attack vectors from a wireless standpoint, right? Man in the middle, evil twin, and the third one I forgot off the top of my head. But it's able to knock three of those out. It's low hanging fruit, just and that's actually an amendment that many Wi-Fi or many WPA2 systems are capable of using. You just have to make sure your end devices are also compatible with it. So there's a lot of cases to where you could actually enable management frame protection, but you got to make sure your end devices are compatible. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So
Yeah, and I mean, kind of to that same thing, we've been going with that, going through that with some customers, as some of this stuff's going into life, and it's, a lot of the wireless clients that we use for mobility, the industrial versions, almost everybody's got at least a Wi-Fi 6 capable client that's out there and available now. And so a lot of that, it's this is probably another different section this would apply to, but you have the 802.11n chipset doesn't support channel 144. So like you can have, especially if you have RM enabled on some of this stuff, you can have dead spots that you don't expect to have. And the survey looks great because, there's coverage everywhere. And if you don't have that knowledge of, okay, well, 802.11n doesn't allow for channel 144 access or stuff like that. WPA3, what is it? It's not compliance. What's the word? Having the capability to use WPA3 and stuff like that. Like customers are putting out these new standards and saying, hey, we can use, we want everything to be able to do this. And we still have some customers that are like, we require a WPA2 and
right.
We're going to use these in clients. And it's like, well, in some cases it's like, well, the Wi-Fi 6 client is basically the same price, like, and you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot because these, the radios are really robust. So they're going to be kicking 10 years from now still, barring some crazy accident with them or an uncommon failure of it. So it's like now you're going to have an 802.11n radio 10 years in the future still running on a system. And it's like, what problems is that going to create for you down the road where it's like, okay, the backwards compatibility, everything else is going to suffer because when that client's talking, it has to kick back into that mode.
Exactly. I mean, I still go into sites and see end clients on 802.11g and B, for God's sakes. They'll still have B clients out there. And then wonder why everything is slowing down. Well, I mean, you're throwing a device that's max capability is 11 meg, for God's sakes, and your radio has to compensate for that. So it ends up slowing down everybody else in order to be able to take care of that.
I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, Global Process Automation. GPA is an engineering and technology firm based in North Carolina, serving clients in industrial processing and manufacturing, focusing on solutions for industrial automation, operational technology infrastructure, industrial control systems cybersecurity, manufacturing intelligence, and analytics. For over 25 years, their clients have entrusted them with their processes to maximize their company's efficiency and obtain an optimal ROI based upon their assets while protecting their operational technology resources. GPA's mission is to automate, optimize, and secure manufacturing floors everywhere while maintaining their core values to have integrity, to continuously improve, embody their community, remain customer focused, and implement great teamwork. Thanks, and back to our show.
So that's kind of the scenario situation you're looking at if you don't start that upgrade process.
I'm not saying you accidentally knock that off into the molten metal crucible that's nearby, but
it could happen. It could happen. It wouldn't be the first time an access point has been melted, right?
Yeah. Well, one or two whoopses and then those clients are gone. No, but I mean, in all seriousness, so that's, some of that stuff, there's plenty of hardware out there where you can kind of bypass that stuff. I mean, we still have systems all the time where they're using those like PC Summit cards. So it's like an internal NIC and, they all of a sudden they're having all these problems where the system ran fine and they updated the infrastructure and it's like, well, yeah, this hasn't had like a support update in 10 years.
I was at a warehouse for a manufacturing client. Oh gosh, this was probably 8, 9 years ago, and they had industrial laptops on their fork trucks running around, but they didn't have their own wireless clients, and these were very old computers, and they had 802.11g PCMCIA cards stuck in them, and they were wondering why their infrastructure refresh wasn't working very well.
Yep.
It
Yeah, we
wasn't
see
the
that a bunch.
infrastructure, it was the clients. And so that's when they after we had a long discussion with them, they realized, oh, well, we need to upgrade all of these now too. So, one upgrade begets another is really kind of what it rolls down to, right?
Hmm. Well, it just I'm going to use a college word here. It exacerbates an underlying problem that's there. But yeah, so and then so how does that scalability? That's or that's exactly like the next segment you have listed here is like scalability and performance, right? Like as you do these upgrades, it's like it's not very scalable if you are not replacing these lower capability clients on there and you're not getting the full features that you have. So you might, God forbid you trust the marketing numbers, right? But then when you get into reality of like not theoretical throughput, but actual throughput and actual latency that you can achieve on the system, and then the math ain't mathing on that, a lot of times it is just you've got these older clients on there that are basically like inhibiting the full capabilities of the system you put in place.
Well, even then, you got to take a look at the support hardware. Is your switching infrastructure going to be able to support the throughput rates of the new clients and the new APs? Or are you going to overwhelm that old 10100 switch that you've had in there for the past 20 years and nobody's replaced it because if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Mentality's not going to cut it because it's just not going to be able to keep up with the multiple data inputs that are going to be slamming into it.
Yep. Or they swapped that switch out, but they didn't increase the cable quality.
Yeah, that's something I think a lot of people don't think about either. They have their old Cat 5 or Cat 5e in place, and they're trying to run 10 gig across it, and they're wondering why it's not working right. So I
Yeah.
totally get that. Best practices for safety are very, very, very important, obviously, because you don't want anybody getting hurt, right? And then really you want to make sure there's no breakdown in your process due to safety traffic not making it, right? So there's really kind of a whole you could do a whole show on nothing but wireless safety um, when it comes down to it. But realistically, where you're looking at redundancy, you're looking at fail-safe mechanisms, you're looking at real-time communication standards like ISA 100 and Wireless Heart already have implemented in them, right? Uh, so they already have kind of a best practices for safety already built into the protocol, which makes
Mhm.
it easier to deploy and manage long term, right? Which, speaking of long term, that kind of leads us into maintenance and just taking care of your network. So if you're following these best practices, you end up developing like a standardized practice for diagnosing problems and upgrading systems. You create documentation standards and using the appropriate remote management tools, right? These are all best practices that long term help you keep your industrial wireless network healthy.
Yeah, for the love of God, if you have to do some sort of weird troubleshooting steps or something to get something to work, document it, save it, put it on your network, share it with your team because that I can't tell you how many times like just doing like a quick 10-minute write-up of something, you know, the same like a lot of people say with their blogs, like, oh, I'll look back at this thing I handled 10 years ago. You're able to like re-reference that over and over again. But that'll keep you off of the phone or keep you from having to travel to site oftentimes because hey, here's this thing, like check this out, try it, let me know if this works. And then it might actually like kind of lower your need to be there. And that's kind of looking at a lot of this stuff. I think that a lot of times like I mean we definitely have like gone through some of this like when when my boss passed away a few years ago, it's like, you don't want that maintenance or like quirks of the system just living in somebody's head. And then when you lose that person, you lose that tribal knowledge, because, there's no guarantee somebody's not going to, have a health scare, get hit by a bus, take a different job.
Yeah, that's kind of what we
Anything
throw
like
out at
that.
clients is will it pass the hit by the bus test, right? You don't have any of this stuff documented. Well, are you going to pass the hit by the bus test? What's the hit by the bus test? Well, if you get hit by the bus tomorrow, how screwed are they going to be, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yep. I mean, I've been living that for 2 years. But yeah, I mean, and even stuff like too, like, putting some thought into just how you do your network documentation. Do you have a golden configuration for, we've got a fleet of 20 vehicles, or we've got five reactors, or whatever it is in your plant, or in your environment. Do you have like a golden config for that piece of hardware? Not everybody has that nice plug at Siemens. I mean, and even if you have a configuration plug on like a Siemens device, right? Like, do you have a way where if this is not here, you've got an easy way, a document where almost anybody in the company can take that document, take that piece of hardware, and then put that configuration and those settings in there, and then deploy that device without the requirement of you as like the lead wireless person for the company having to be available for that. Because sometimes you're on a plane going out of country for 15 hours, or sometimes you're on PTO, or any of those kind of things, having that stuff there. I even think too, like, this is not listed in the notes, but as I've been training one of the newer engineers, we have like having people understand what the tools that you use actually provide. So, we had them, and God love him, he's learning, right? He's doing a great job, but things like, how do you use something like a Wi-Fi Explorer? Well, like, that's typically, so for that, like an example would be, that's a piece of software meant to be like a static capture point. That's not a site survey tool. It's kind of like a management traffic, like just kind of a fire hose, or like a big collector of information, so you can see kind of a big picture view. And so as he was kind of like writing up an assessment of a site, he was making commentary on that based on like, well, if this vehicle moves through this area, you shouldn't have to worry about this interferer that you see right here, because these are the next two APs on these other channels, and they're this strong. And it's like, you can't really say, hey, this is a good measurement for what that vehicle is going to state, because the only thing that you can guarantee from that measurement is, at this physical point, at this point in time, here's what I see. And, so that was like a really good conversation for him as like a younger engineer, saying, well, what is an RRM system, right? Well, it's basically like wireless channel and power whack-a-mole, right? Like, it takes in all this input throughout the course of the day.
That's a great way to describe it.
Like, it takes in all that information throughout the course of the day. And then at whatever interval you allow it, it makes changes to the system. So it's like, yeah, maybe those two channels are clear right there, but tomorrow those two APs might switch right on top of that channel. And guess what? It's a wireless printer that's doing this. That AP might have shelves, desks, all kinds of stuff obstructing that access point from seeing that as an interferer. But your vehicle, as it moves around, it might move into the perfect position, and it's 10 feet from that printer, and it's got clear line of sight to that access point. And then all of a sudden your vehicle's dying, and you don't know what it is. And it does it every couple of days, or it does it, once or twice a month. And it just depends on how that, or it's not randomized, but how that RRM or adaptive RF tool decides to change stuff around. So having just, like, that's information that it's like, that shouldn't live in your head, right? Like, that should be, hey, here's the limitations of this tool, and just have like a document, even just stuff like that, like key things to keep in mind about this tool. Like, here's its limitations, advantages and limitations.
No, that makes perfect sense. That really does.
And then I think too, like the, this interoperability between devices, right? Like, That's a really interesting thing because we see this, I mean, a ton of times, passive client issues where it's which for people that don't know, that's basically like if you have like a work group bridge or a wireless client, it's got multiple devices behind it. It doesn't necessarily keep the AP side ARP table up to date, and so you'll end up with a situation where you have a single IP address that has multiple entries for a MAC address, and so then you essentially create kind of like a dead end or a black hole for maybe like the controller on your AGV as the traffic travels around. So it'll just stop because it doesn't know, especially if it sits in a cell for a long time, because that device will drop off of your ARP table. And so then it looks like, hey, we're having these comm faults, but and again, it's a situation. Just a site survey is not going to tell you, hey, it's got great signal sitting here. I'm at -55 or whatever. There's no channel interference. Like, why is this thing just stopping? But and usually like we'll see it. Well, it worked fine, but we just switched to the new. I don't want to say the company name, but it's like, because it happens with all sorts of them. But like we switched to this new controller, and now we have a cloud-based controller, and now we have an on-site controller. We upgraded the AP, a firmware change happens. So being aware of some of that stuff and keep it, and also like explicitly stating that like in your troubleshooting steps, like what, in the past 6 months or whatever, because sometimes these things just occur as a problem and somebody says, oh, I'll look at that later. And then it's been going on for 6 months. And then all of a sudden you forgot, hey, we pushed this firmware, John pushed this firmware and he's on, sabbatical or, whatever. I don't know that you get sabbatical in, manufacturing. We're not that lucky, but it's like, they're on this completely other project, or, I mean, we see it, I'm sure you've seen this in a bunch of organizations, but it's like org charts are just, it's like a box of puzzle pieces. Sometimes they get shaken up all the time. So this person that was on this group is now working with this other group. So they're not in that email thread anymore where they say, oh yeah, and this, at this plant, we changed this stuff a couple months ago. So like that information doesn't automatically just like pop up.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you get cases of where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing,
Mm-hmm.
because these different groups have completely different projects that they're working on. So there really is no sort of cross training or cross understanding of the systems.
Yeah. Oh, and dude, that's the classic IT/OT
Divide right there,
conflict too. Yeah, where it's like, well, the IT people just push, that's not a knock on them, but it's like they've got their own set of responsibilities and stuff to do. They push this change out. We're, in this section, we're riding on the IT network and we have our own SSID that's piped out through a VLAN or whatever it is. And so
Well,
you'll get stuff like that.
that'll put me on a whole nother, conversation of what a lot of people don't realize. Well, let me start again here. IT and OT are similar in the fact that we use the same hardware and the same tools, and that's where that ends. Because everything else, thought processes, dynamic design, and everything else that we use all of this equipment for has a completely different thought process behind it versus IT. So when an IT person say, this is a great idea, we should push this down to everybody, and next thing you know, you have I don't know, some software that's going to take away user rights if that user hasn't been used in a long time, or it's going to take away user rights if it's a default username and password. And what they don't realize is in the controls universe, there are so many controls out there that you can only use the default controls on, the default credentials to log into, and those credentials have grandmaster access to that device. But then you push down your security software because it's a great idea. You need to be secure. And now all of a sudden your plant shuts down because nobody can log in using the shared credentials that had admin access, because those credentials have been nerfed, right? And they're there for a reason, because the end devices, you can't change them, right? Or you can't they have to be that way for different things to access one another. But IT just doesn't have the experience to understand that. They're not down in the trenches. They're not getting their feet dirty. They stay in the carpeted spaces.
They
But
don't have the production manager breathing down their throat because it's not working. and sometimes they just will say, "Oh, well, my work day's over. I'll catch this up later," because they don't get the nasty grams or.
Now, to be fair, they also don't get the popsicles either.
Bro,
But
those popsicles, let me tell you, you've
on a
ever
hot
been
day, they're life
dehydrated?
changing.
Oh, and that's not, and two, I think that it's getting better. It's definitely like a well-worn groove. Everybody's kind of discussed that disconnect, and it seems like the culture of as this stuff gets more married and intertwined, like companies are starting to notice, hey, we do have these kind of different sets of concerns. And so it's, thankfully people are working to educate across things. And it's like, and I know it's funny to be like, the IT people suck, but they're not, it's like they're not really they shouldn't be looked at as like a nemesis, right? Like you just have to consider that like they don't know what they don't know about our universe, and then from the same token, there's stuff where it's like we don't know what we don't know about what they're doing, and so I know that I've created headaches for IT people, so I know that they're mumbling at the copier, enjoying their air conditioned space. Just
I have made my fair share of corporate IT people very angry at me, so I get that as well.
sometimes you walk by and they kicked over your chair, and you're like, why is this bucket on its side? It was sitting upright.
Don't touch an OT guy's bucket. They don't understand. They don't get it. It not only is it utility for carrying things, but it's the best seat in the house when you're in an MCC.
Man, I was at a site the other day, and there was like a chair and a bucket, and the guy was like, I'll sit on the bucket. And I was like, nah, man, it's tradition. I got to do it.
So
Even though the chair is way more comfortable.
right. You can't break with tradition, right?
So
So
what about
at some point,
compliance? Oh, go ahead.
the industrial Wi-Fi bucket will be a thing, and people will be able to acquire the industrial Wi-Fi buckets.
Man, what would be pretty sweet would be to have like which it wouldn't, I think it'd be a nightmare to travel with, but I'd love to make myself a bucket where I like build in some little like shelving in there where I can put like a USB courtesy port on there and like battery pass through. That's but I was telling you before we started recording, I'm on Amazon probation right now. So
Well, that's because you got caught, you know, so you got to be more careful with that.
well, when you're married and you have joint finances, it's probably better that way.
And internally, I'm laughing because I understand. I'm in a very similar situation. Fortunately, she as of recently, I've kind of calmed it down to get off the radar, but there's a few things I'm eyeballing now that um, if I space them out right, I shouldn't get in trouble for.
Yeah, Wendy, we got him. I do that at work all the time with the guys. No, it's my wife's just like, is that another flashlight? And I'm like, yeah, but this one's,
This one's
it's got,
different. It's better.
yeah, it provides the 5 seconds of light that I'm going to need this week at night that I couldn't get for my cell phone that was also in my hand. I mean, that's, it's like at a certain point, I have to just tell myself no. So
Oh man.
what about
So
compliance and standards?
well, I mean, compliance and standards are always important for best practices, especially when you're looking at regulatory compliances that different manufacturing sites have to, well, comply to. So if you're doing configuration and installation and setup of a wireless network at any sort of water treatment facility, you're going to have EPA things that you're going to have to follow, right? And if you have to be compliant in these certain things, go ahead and design that into your overall structure, right? So that you already have that built in. You don't have to worry about it later. You know that XYZ data has to get there, and that if something goes down, that you have some sort of store and forward mechanism set up, right? So if you, and that's just one little small example of what I'm talking about. But with other ISA standards, they already have best practices for deploying those standards. Just again, as an example, ISA 100 and wireless HART. There's all manner of documentation out there on best practices for the installation of those networks. And if you follow those, that will ensure your scalability, that will help ensure ease of maintenance, that will help ensure OTAs, over-the-air updates for sensors and the different modules that go along with those protocols. So there's a lot to be said with compliance and standards.
And I think maybe even too, like I will never forget it because I got shocked. But if the best practice or the limitations for installing stuff say, don't put this close to the bus bar, keep it this distance away, keep it that distance away, even if it's not convenient, even if it's going to cost extra money, because this stuff is not, it's designed to keep the environment safe. It's designed to keep personnel safe. It's, I mean, this is tangentially related, but my father's an electrician and worked in a shipyard, and probably 25 years ago, somebody had like bypassed a safety switch on a crane, and he went to like cut it off. And I'm sure it was like that for 10 years with no problems, but it arced, and he got all the skin on his face. I mean, he got really lucky, but all the skin on his face and one of his arms melted off.
Wow.
So it's like, it's not just like, oh, this is an inconvenience, but it's like, it's not an inconvenience, or it's more than an inconvenience to a person that gets hurt as a result of that. Or, if, we've seen train derailments and chemical spills and all that kind of stuff, and it's like, even if it doesn't necessarily say, oh, this is like a wireless thing, it's like all that stuff matters, and there's a reason that stuff is in place.
Yeah. So when you look at best practices in general, best practices are written down in order to give you guidelines to follow to make sure that people stay safe and that you have a successful deployment, right? So, in that vein, we here at the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop are next month are going to start releasing a series of wireless best practice guides for industrial applications. So the topics will include everything from running SIP safety over wireless through the proper ways to terminate, configure, and deploy radiant coax, right? Possibly redundant wireless links, IPCF, which is that's the
Siemens.
That's the Siemens point coordination function, correct?
Yep.
These resources will be freely available to any of our listeners as a way of us really wanting to give back to the community that supported us for our entire careers, right? So I'm really excited to start releasing these next month. I think the first one, Jeremy, that we're going to release is SIP safety over wireless, and then I think we're going to tackle the RCoax, and then we've got a few others that we're starting to work on, and so hopefully before too long we'll have a nice repository of a variety of best practices guidelines for everyone to be able to download and use to help keep everybody safe, to help your deployment be as successful as it can be, and make those clients happy and help people build stuff, because that's what we do.
Yeah. And I think too, this might be a good opportunity to say, like, if you're out there listening right now, and there's an aspect of like industrial wireless that, you think would be something good to have, like a guide to best practices on, drop us an email.
Please reach out on LinkedIn or through our IWS emails, Scott at Industrial Wi-Fi Shop or Jeremy at industrialwifishop.com. Let us know. Let's talk about it.
You can also text or call Scott at 555-555-5555.
And if you text me, I'll be sure to give you Jeremy's private numbers and his bathroom schedule so that you can interrupt him when he's taking care of business.
That's probably the only free time, quote, air quotes, free time I got.
So, well, we want to make sure that you're productive when you're being productive.
So Scott, let's we're kind of towards the end of this. So like what's on the bench for you?
So currently on the bench, I just got in 3 of those Halo Link radios. Um, and I'm really excited to get those fired up and initially configured. I got a trip coming up. I'll be in Texarkana for a week, and then when I get back, I want to get those configured up and start messing and see what I can push through and see if I can get it to push through my entire neighborhood and some trees at the same time. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then
Well, so on those Halo links, I've taken them apart, taken pictures. Also, if you're in the WLAN Pros Slack group, we need to overload the random section, the random channel, so that way we can get like an IoT specific channel. Be nice, but if you're in there, we're working towards trying to get something for like sub 1 gig and IoT devices because there's not currently one. There's a handful of people that actually won some of these from a WLPC giveaway, which, by the way, if you had entered, you probably would have won some, Heath. But I've gotten feedback on LinkedIn. One of the people that received a set of them, he was able to get, I think, close to the full 32 megabits over the link, just bench top. One of the guys has been doing some development stuff on it, and they're putting together like GPS Raspberry Pi like style like site survey tools with these where they're trying to tie that stuff in. He also just set the thing up in his window and then went kind of out in his yard and was like streaming some HD, watching a basketball game out in his yard over this
yeah,
stuff. So I think it's got a ton of potential. I see some options where in maybe like some automotive or some other things like that, like giving you the ability to not further congest like the 2.4 or the 2.4 or 5, like the production frequencies, and be able to sort of remote in or something like that where you're not stepping on anything active. You do need to be aware, like, is there anything else operating at 900 megahertz in the plant? But
yeah,
those things are pretty handy.
I see a big opportunity for Halo in wastewater.
Yeah, and those things, and they're tiny. I mean,
Yeah,
it'd be nice if there was like a more industrialized enclosure for that. But
with like a 24-volt power connection as
yeah,
opposed to
something
standard
something
power.
like that. But also, pretty soon, like I think Q3 is when Morse Micro said they're going to be putting it out. They're going to have a USB, the chip on a USB, so you could essentially turn anything that's got a USB port into a Halo capable device. And then
Oh,
those things are
so
pretty
a
sweet.
Halo
But
wireless adapter essentially.
yeah, and they're also pretty sweet because it's like the Halo Link is like a partnership between GLI Net and Morse Micro. And so the actual piece of hardware itself is also like RNDIS capable. So, you can put one of these in and then disable the 2.4 radio on it and then basically use it in a sense as like a USB dongle at this point. And so like provide that connectivity as well across that without even needing to use an Ethernet port on there. So just with the USB connection. So those things I see those things having a lot of potential, and
I do too. I
I've
do
been
too.
looking for some
But again,
opportunities.
as a 900 megahertz junkie, that's kind of I'm always I'm always looking for some cool utility using that frequency. I don't know why I'm fascinated with it.
Yeah. And then what's the other thing you said you had? You got
So
some Bluetooth radios.
Tobias Meyer from Onyx sent me a pair of their industrial Bluetooth radios out of their Data Eagle series, and so I finally had to get they run on M12 cables for both power and data, but they're separate. So I had to order some cables from Amazon since we're Amazon junkies. I ordered those cables. They finally came in, so I was able to get them powered up. But I just got the software downloaded to get them configured. So one of the things I'll do when I get back from Texarkana is actually get them configured and try to get some data throwing back and forth because I really want to get some spectrum captures of these guys just rocking some Bluetooth communication.
Yeah, and that's man, the Onyx stuff, and I guess it's in Europe, it's Modus or there. I'm not 100% clear on like the rebrand, but we've actually finally run into we have several customers that use them, but finally run into some like support situations where we've had to use those. They had those clients and they've got some pretty good little features in them. And if you're a Mac user, it's a little bit painful. We've got the M3s, or all of us have like the ARM chips now and stuff. So like the Windows VM route doesn't really work out too well for us for a lot of stuff, but it was very straightforward to get them configured, do the data, you can do the data logging and write it to a USB drive. So that's pretty exciting. And I think we got them lined up next for the next episode. So that's gonna be pretty cool.
We have successfully talked Tobias into being on the show, so that should be next episode.
And
Speaking of next episode,
maybe he'll loan me some stuff. And then I wanted to maybe just take a quick second and talk about a few things that I ran into in the last couple of weeks that were pretty interesting. So the Eero, I think it's primarily like, is it Soho, single office, home office, or like home mesh
small office, home office.
Yeah. So it's they're not really kind of geared towards like an industrial application, but we had some customers that were using some of that hardware for kind of ad hoc's probably the wrong word because of the implications, but basically like a quick stand up, easily supportable wireless network for the controls engineers to be able to kind of log in remotely or as they walk around. They look pretty easy to set up, and so currently they're not really, I would say exercise caution using them because they're default 80 megahertz channels and you can't really force them off of a channel, so there's no manual channel settings or ability to change the channel. But Drew Lentz is awesome. And so I reached out to him and he hooked us up with
he works for Eero now, right?
Yeah, so he hooked us up with one of the Eero techs, who was awesome to work with, and he helped us get the channel. So kind of don't bombard him with emails if you're using this stuff, but kind of on that front, he was able to narrow the channels and kind of force it off of the channels we were using. But I heard a little birdie from them that they're looking at, and sounds like Drew's kind of pushing for this, for giving us a little bit more access to the nerd knobs. But if we get that, man, those things are like super easy. So easy, an OT guy can deploy them. And then another thing, I got a WLAN Pi Go to do some testing with, and Adrian hooked me up with kind of like a beta test of the Wi-Fi Explorer Pi. And so I was walking around looking like Mr. Cool Dork with my phone and my Go on there, and doing Wi-Fi Explorer captures on that, and then just airdropping the PCAPs back to my computer to do analysis with that. And I'm really excited for that to come out because it's have you seen it yet?
I have not.
I'll send you some pictures off, but it's a beautiful piece of hardware. It's fits in that same case like the Lucid comes with.
Okay.
So you could actually probably fit both of those into the same case. Very straightforward. There's not like a bunch of buttons and knobs and stuff. But yeah, man, that's just like going to be a great little piece of kit. And I think that's going to be something that when you get the chance, you're going to want to get one of those, because you should be able to still do like the tail scale and stuff like that. And so you can have somebody like your smart hand or something like that. Like you could just ship that Go to that person and then pull a capture in an area and have them send it back. You could do the same thing with the WLAN Pi, but it's just like a nice little piece of hardware.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's that, and then I guess maybe let's talk about kind of some of the next options for episodes that we have,
Yeah,
or
so what we
people are
got coming
looking at.
up, we have talked Tobias from Onyx into coming on the show, so I'm excited about that. I have been talking to a couple of guys from NetAlly, and I'm going to mention your name, Dan Klemke, has agreed to be on the show. Just not sure who we're going to get. I would love to get Julio Petrovic on. He's one of their product managers. He knows the nuts and bolts of all their pieces. I'm actually gonna see him at WICO. So hopefully I'll get to talk him into himself being on the show. That would be great. And then also, we were talking about the NIST IEEE group. The guy who runs all that, Dr. Rick Kandel, has also agreed to come on the show at some point.
That's awesome, because I made a note that said that I think that'd be like a really informative episode, just to, maybe just to kind of help people understand how the sausage is made and that kind of stuff. Especially because we do have, IT and OT listeners, and there's a ton of people that are going for the CYs or CW&E,
Right.
and that kind of help paint a picture too of, like, what is a working group, or what is, how do these things become standards, and stuff like that. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, so
And
I'm pretty
then
excited about that. Rick was very uh open to coming on and talking about whatever we wanted to dive into. So
and then I had approached, because I saw a really interesting video from him. Oh God, I'm gonna butcher his name, but I think it's Jan Reister. And he had done a presentation on deploying R coax in a warehouse, and it wasn't like a traditional,
I
or I
watched
say
that video and
traditional.
I thought that video was awesome because it's a really you know what? We'll link that in the show notes.
Hmm.
Um, it's a really kind of out of the box thinking way to deploy our coax for shelf crawler bots that go and pull things off shelves, and um, it really kind of opened my eyes to another possibility on really being able to use our coax in that sort of scenario. I was really impressed with it. Now I know when you go and watch the video, it's not perfect, and he says so in the video, and he talks about all the pros and cons and whatnot. But I really think it's an innovative design what they're doing.
And it's also not necessarily cheaper than throwing a bunch of APs in there.
Agreed.
But sometimes that's not really that's not really a good option, especially in some of those, like, really, like, closed in, you can't get to them things. It could be a situation where you could actually have your APs on the outside of that ASRS, or whatever that machine cell is, and be able to access that, because a lot of times, unless it's physically damaged, the antennas don't really go bad. But you might need to swap a piece of hardware out or something. I think that'd be a really interesting thing. I think that it'd be interesting to get somebody on from that does, like, mining. I think maybe some people that specifically do antennas for that, or in those kind of, like, extreme temperature environment things, like maybe MP antennas, or um, somebody along those lines. That might be pretty interesting.
I'd
And
be
then
interested to see what James Mifsud would have to say in a situation like that. I wonder if we could pull
I
some
think we
strings
should.
and see if we could get James on. And for those of you who don't know who he is, he's actually one of our listeners. He won one of the books on our last giveaway, and he's in Australia. So it might be interesting in time coordination, but he works for a large mining firm in Australia, and so I would love to get his take on things and the
Yeah,
extreme
and I think
environments that he's got.
I think maybe even, like, trying to get a couple of people that are in different kinds of environments might be kind of cool to have, like, a round table on that environment. Also, I've got a contact at Fortinet, and I think at some point in time that might be worth trying to pull those guys in. So
Yeah, Amy
it
Engineer is the best. I want to see if we can get Amy Engineer.
that'd be cool. Well, you're Mr. Socialite, so you can I think you can handle that. And then, at some point in time, we got to get some private cellular people on here to discuss some of that stuff too, like where they're seeing that.
I agree, and we'll have to go harass Mark with a K and get a few others.
Is that? Oh no, it was with a C. Empire Records had a Mark with a C in it.
Correct.
We just missed Rex Manning Day, by the way. I don't know
Oh.
for anybody who celebrates. I tried to tell my son to watch not that but Hackers, and he was like, "That's like he told me it was like the Temu Fortnite, and that's a boomer movie." And I was like, "Okay, man." I'm like, I guess I am getting old.
Yes, sir. Well, on that note, we've covered a lot of material today.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. We have covered a lot of material, and we have a
We
lot
even
of
ran
great
over
stuff
time.
coming up. Good times, my man. Good times. So thanks everybody for joining us. And we will see you again soon on episode 17, whatever that may be.
Thanks for listening, everybody, and we hope you join us on our next episode of the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop.